What's up, everybody? Happy game day, the very first game of 2022. Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. What a better way to start the year than with a win over Mike Zimmer and the Minnesota Vikings. Could not have scripted a more perfect start to the year if you wanted to. But we are into really the, end game of the 2021-2022 season from a Packers standpoint. We basically know at this point that Green Bay will play somewhere between 3 and 6 more games this year, and that's it. And the worst case scenario is 3, obviously, where they win probably the next 2 games and then would somehow lose the divisional round. If they were to play 6 games, that means that they likely lost probably this game to Minnesota, but either to Minnesota or Detroit, and ended up with not getting the bye, which would mean they'd have to go 4 games. But that means that they would get in the Super Bowl if they played 6 games and have an opportunity to win it. So not the worst case scenario in the world, of course. But again, they will play somewhere between 3 and 6. The most amount of games that they could possibly lose is 3. They would have to lose to Minnesota, Detroit, and then their first game in the wild card to lose 3 games. The most games that they can possibly win is 5. You got to figure, if they win out the next 2 in the regular season, they would have then, gotten the first round bye, which then they would win divisional, conference, and Super Bowl to get 5. If they somehow lost one of these games and had to play in the wild card, they would still then likely win the other game and then win 4 playoff games. So again, the most they can win is 5. So Green Bay will play between somewhere in 3 and 6 games. They could lose as many as 3 games the remainder of the year. They could win as many as 5. And of course, the ultimate goal remains, and that is to win a Super Bowl. I don't know why I went into that tangent, but those things always are, exciting to talk about for me. I don't know why. Probably because I'm just a nerd and like talking football in any capacity, but I digress. Let's get into the main crux of today's show. Let's jump into report from Mike Garafolo. So he did a little featurette on NFL Network, basically stating that the Packers are still hoping to get Zadarius Smith back for the playoffs. Now, it's a little bit tough to glean from the video in and of itself if this is new reporting that the Packers are now more hopeful that Zadarius Smith is going to play this season and play for the playoffs, or if this was just sort of status quo. The Packers are, remain hopeful that Z and Bakhtiari and Zadarius and so on and so forth are going to be able to play at some point in this playoffs, which has basically been the Packers company line since any of these 3 players have gotten hurt. So a little bit tough to glean what that is, but the fact that Garafolo is reporting on Zadarius Smith in any capacity at this point is tough to take as anything more than a positive. And it should be noted that Zadarius was the featured player of that as well. So it does seem, and again, I don't want to put words in Mike's mouth here, but it does seem like there may be some optimism, and I struggle to use that word because I'm sort of in the I'll believe it when I see it camp with Zadarius Smith. But the fact that he's, reporting it in any capacity and putting Z on that list and making him really the featured player of that featurette, if you will, to me in some capacity, it at least gives some hope because, again, as I was, talking about earlier this week, I'm not sure I had any before that report that Z would play again for the Packers. So we will see. Again, I'm very much in the I'll believe it when I see it camp, but interesting report from Mike Garafolo nonetheless. Make sure to check it out over on NFL Network. You can find it on Twitter as well. But interesting that he brought up Zadarius specifically, and again said that the Packers remain hopeful that he could be back. So check that out. In more important news, at least in the near future, for the Minnesota Vikings, Michael Pierce was downgraded to out for this game. So just another brutal loss for Minnesota. And as Bill Huber so perfectly pointed out, Michael Pierce was their big free agent signing, not this offseason, but the previous offseason, which means that he's had 4 opportunities to play against the Green Bay Packers in that time, and he will have played in absolutely 0 of those games. Of course, he opted out of all of last season, missed the first matchup this year, and now misses the second matchup. So worth noting that Minnesota did beat Green Bay earlier this season without Michael Pierce, but it is still a major loss for their defense, and they will have to try and stop Green Bay without one of their top paid defensive linemen, defensive players, period, in Michael Pierce. Let's jump over to the Packers side of the ball, which I'm sure you are much more interested in. Green Bay did get a slew of players back from the COVID IR list, including their punter, Corey Bojorquez. So they will have a punter for this game. They also returned Ben Braden, Oren Burks, Tyler Davis, and Mercedes Lewis. So they get back a couple of their tight ends to solidify that position. Ben Braden to solidify the depth on that offensive line. And then Oren Burks to solidify the depth at inside linebacker. As I mentioned yesterday, Isaiah McDuffie was really the last piece at inside linebacker left behind both Barnes and Devondre Campbell. So getting Burks back certainly helps as well. Ty Summers was also reverted off of the COVID list, but remember, he's on the IR list anyway, so really no change in status for the game with Summers coming back off the list. And then RJ McIntosh also was taken off, but he remains on the practice squad at this point. In additional moves, Abdullah Anderson and David Moore were up from the practice squad. Anderson will provide depth with Kingsley Keke out and Tyler Lancaster questionable for this game along the defensive line. And you have to think that there's a chance that David Moore could be returning punts for Green Bay. He has done that in the past. Green Bay doesn't exactly have a player to do that with Amari Rodgers on the COVID list, so that could be his role for this game as well as playing on special teams. Additional news and notes, Aaron Adoye was released off the practice squad, so that's one less player on that group. And then Elliott Fry was added to the practice squad. Now, he is a kicker. So the Packers currently have Mason Crosby, J.J. Molson, and Elliott Fry, all as kickers, all on this roster in some capacity. Why would they add a third kicker, you ask? Well, I have to think that this is a bit of insurance this week in case Mason Crosby would test positive for COVID on Sunday. And the reason I say that is J.J. Molson just went on the COVID list, so they sort of lost their insurance at the kicker position. You certainly don't want to be caught without a kicker for the game, and you have to have somebody on your roster on Sunday if you're going to bring somebody up. So this gives them a bit of insurance. And if you think about it this way, Corey Bojorquez and J.J. Molson both have tested positive for COVID in this week, right? So you have to think all of those meetings and get-togethers and so on and so forth, that it's possible that Mason Crosby could potentially test positive as well. And if that were to happen, again, you don't want to be caught without a kicker, period. So with Molson gone and just wanting to extra protect yourself in case Crosby goes down, my guess is that's why Elliott Fry is currently on the practice squad. And if Mason's able to kick and they're able to get Molson back, my guess is they would probably release Fry quickly after. But you never quite know with Brian Gutekunst. He always has a plan, and we could see something different. But my guess is that is insurance for Mason Crosby on game day. In addition, there's more. I guess not moves per se, but I think Zach Cruz made a great point of all the COVID issues that we've sort of navigated throughout the course of this week. At the end of the day, the only two people, at least as of this recording, things could still change on Sunday, but as of this recording, that are out for Green Bay, that are on the active roster with a COVID issue, are Kingsley Keke and Amari Rodgers. That's it. After name after name after name after name of players who were moved to the COVID IR list, the only active players on the 53-man roster on the COVID IR list as of the beginning of the day Sunday are Kingsley Keke and Amari Rodgers. So pretty incredible. This change in COVID protocols has certainly changed things pretty drastically for the Packers and the rest of the league, and getting back all of these players is a huge benefit for the Packers. Meanwhile, Kirk Cousins remains out and will be out for this game for Minnesota. So if you're sort of weighing things out, at least as of recording this right now, Green Bay definitely the benefactor right now with Cousins out and Green Bay getting the majority of their players back. All right, let's actually break down this game, because even though it's Sean Mannion and even though Green Bay's, basically been boosted up to about 13 and a half point favorites, somewhere around there, this is still a game that could give you some concern. This is still a very desperate Minnesota Vikings team that absolutely has to have a win in order to keep their playoff chances alive. You know that this is still a bitter rivalry, one that Minnesota would love to win. And I do think in some capacity, if you're looking at pressure, right? I do think the pressure has swung fully on Green Bay with Kirk Cousins getting deactivated and Adam Thielen out and Michael Pierce out and so on and so forth, right? If you kind of go into this game and everything was normal, I think there's equal pressure on both sides. Minnesota's playing for their playoff lives. They may be playing for their coach's job. Kirk Cousins is sort of still in that weird, bizarro, are they paying him too much money sort of spot. There's a lot more pressure, I think, actually on Minnesota. Green Bay's still fighting for that number one spot, but they still have, everything ahead of them and could still clinch it in other ways. And there certainly was pressure going into Green Bay, again, to keep that number one spot regardless. But I think there was more pressure on Minnesota had everything been equal. But once Kirk Cousins goes out and Thielen goes out and Pierce goes out, and your playoff chances even with you going into this game are still only about 10%. I think that takes sort of some of the pressure off of Minnesota, and the fact that I think it almost becomes we've got nothing to lose. We're playing with house money. Nobody expects us to win. All the pressure is sort of off of us. All the pressure is on Green Bay, and I think in that way, that has changed the dynamic. Now, it certainly still favors Green Bay, right? You lose your starting quarterback, that's a major issue. But Green Bay has just faced Tyler Huntley, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, and it hasn't exactly been a cakewalk through the last 3 games. So something still to keep an eye on. And, we go back to games in the past where Kirk Cousins has barely thrown passes and Dalvin Cook has taken over games. So you can't just chalk this one up in the win column yet. I do like Green Bay a lot in this game, but you still have to be aware and be careful. And that's, again, why they play every given Sunday. So what are some of the key things to sort of watch in this game? It starts with Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, right? And this is, again, always my first couple are going to be the low-hanging fruit, the obvious ones, but the obvious ones are still worth mentioning. So how does Green Bay, go about stopping that? If I'm Green Bay, I am loading the box, 8-man box, safety over the top of Jefferson, either Stokes or Douglas on Jefferson. I don't care. Probably Stokes, but either one I'm fine with. In fact, now I'm even battling that in my head, but I don't care as long as you've got a safety over the top. I think you have to go into this taking him out of the game with also keeping 8 in the box. I'd like to see probably Savage in the box with Amos over the top. Again, I could go either way there as well, but I like Amos being back a little bit more and being the guy that's more of your safety valve. So if Cook does break through, Amos I trust a little bit more on the back end. Plus him shading Justin Jefferson on the other side, I think Amos has the ability to maybe cover both of those a bit better and just be a little bit more responsible. But you could use Savage's speed in that regards as well, where you're keeping him over the top of Jefferson and he can kind of bounce between the two if he needs to a little bit more and still get over the top if Cook does break one to try to, bring him down in the open field. So could go either way there, but I'd love to see 8 in the box with a safety over the top of Jefferson. Make Sean Mannion and Dede Westbrook and, Smith Marset and the rest of the receivers, make anyone not named Justin Jefferson or Dalvin Cook beat you in this game. If anyone else does, if Mannion does throw into anyone else, you tip your cap and say, congratulations, good game, we'll take the L. But you can't let Jefferson go off for 180. You can't let Cook go off for 180. You have to limit those two as much as possible. And it's really going to be up to Joe Barry to have a serviceable game plan against both of them, which isn't exactly the easiest thing in the world, but it certainly makes it a lot easier when Thielen and Cousins are out. And that's why it's just that much more important that you completely take away those two players and make anyone else, literally anyone else, beat you. Next up is winning on the fringes. Now, turnovers I'm not going to necessarily say are on the fringe, but of course turnovers are a piece of that, right? But what I mean by winning on the fringes is Green Bay is going to have all the major advantages in this game. You've got Aaron Rodgers versus Sean Mannion. You've got home field advantage. Like, you're in a better position. You're a better team. And it's going to take Minnesota just picking away at little things here and there to have a chance in this game, whether that be turnovers, whether that be special teams, whether that be penalty yardage, whether that be drops, whether that be missed field goals, block punts, whatever the case may be. Minnesota has to find a way to create things that are going to swing little bits in their favor, right? Field position, time of possession, whatever that may be. So it's going to be important that Green Bay, at least stays even or doesn't get blown away on the fringes, again, including turnovers, drops, basically mistakes is what I'm looking at. Like, limit the mistakes and don't let Minnesota get small advantages and make this a micro game, because in the macro, the Packers win easy. So I like this game, as I mentioned, a lot for Green Bay, but they got to control the fringes and make sure that Minnesota doesn't pick away at them little by little and take away some of those little advantages that Green Bay should have going into this game. Next, manage those temperatures. And what I mean basically by that is give the ball to A.J. Dillon, let him run over some people, let Minnesota make some business decisions. I would love to see some 2 running back sets in this game. Go back to what they did against the Rams at Lambeau a season ago. I think there's a lot of ways that you can involve Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon into running back sets that is going to be advantageous to your game plan. Let Aaron Rodgers make those quick, split-second decisions. Do I hand to A.J. Dillon? Do I flip it out to Aaron Jones on the edges? And stretch them, and then keep Devontae on the other side. And if they want to double him off to the side, If they're going to double him, then either you're going to have a light box for A.J. Dillon or you're going to have an advantageous swing pass out to Aaron Jones. I want to see a ton of 2 running back sets with Devontae on the far side and working hopefully one-on-one, because if he gets one-on-one, then you just audible to whatever. But if he's doubled, you're going to have numbers on one of those 2, and then it's just Rodgers making a split-second decision, which he can do better than anyone in the world. So I love that idea. I want to see a lot of 2-back sets. Give me pony personnel and let Rodgers make those quick decisions. And in the meantime, I also want to see how the Vikings are lining up against Davante Adams, because the Vikings simply don't have a corner on their roster capable of keeping him in check one-on-one. So if they start to double him again, more creativity. I want to see some of those things that are going to get either advantageous, run boxes for Green Bay to run the ball, or flipping things out and let Aaron Jones become a playmaker on the other side. I just want to see how how Minnesota matches up against Davante Adams and how Green Bay can counter that if they do try to take him out of the game. Some other, just kind of quick ones here. Make Sean Mannion uncomfortable. Don't let him get in any sort of rhythm. He's not a good quarterback. Just don't let him sit in the pocket and dink and dunk and, play 15 yards back in coverage and let him get some easy completions. Make him uncomfortable. Don't give him the easy stuff. And also, by the way, keep him in the game. Both Kellen Mond and Kyle Slaughter would actually worry me more than what Sean Mannion would in this game. So keep him in the game and don't let all of a sudden like an athletic Kellen Mond or a, sort of a wild card in Kyle Slaughter get in the game and start, ripping the ball around. I feel much more comfortable with the sort of expected game out of Sean Mannion than maybe the more unpredictable Mond or Slaughter. Watch out for Kene Nwangu, their kick returner. He is a dynamic kick returner, and we know Green Bay special teams, so that's another player you just want to keep in check. And then last but not least, I want this to be a soul-taking game from Green Bay. You are playing in the frigid temperatures at Lambeau Field. You are the better team. Minnesota doesn't have their quarterback. You have the ability to crush their playoff hopes. And if you can get out to an early lead, they're going to want to get the heck out of Lambeau. They know their playoff shots are done. They know that this is going to be a team that probably goes through some changes in the offseason. Crush their soul in the first quarter, never give it back, and make them question everything this offseason. That's the game I want to see out of Green Bay on this given Sunday to start 2022 off on the right foot. I'm going to go 27-13 Packers. I think it could be a little bit more low scoring with the temperatures, but I still like Green Bay to get in the high 20s, early 30s. I just don't think Sean Mannion's going to be able to do much on offense. Hopefully Green Bay can control Dalvin Cook. I think they'll be much better than they were against the Cleveland Browns a week ago, and they'll shore up that run defense. We shall see. But of course, also keep an eye on that Cowboys-Cardinals game. A Cowboys loss coupled with a Packers win gives Green Bay home field advantage in the playoffs, the number 1 seed, and that bye into the second round. So huge opportunity for Green Bay in this on this day, especially if Dallas loses to the Arizona Cardinals. Enjoy the game. Packers Vikings at Lambeau Field, frigid temperatures, frozen tundra. What more could you possibly want? I'll be right back here tomorrow breaking everything down. But until next time, and as always, and especially against the Vikings, go Pack Go.